For thousands of years, Egypt's royal tombs hid forgotten secrets beneath the sands. But one mystery remains. Was the curse only a legend or a truth lost in time? In the heart of ancient Egypt's desert, where silence has endured for thousands of years, the royal tombs lie undisturbed, sealed behind stones, protected not by force, but by fear. The priests carved their warnings upon the walls, not to protect gold, but to preserve the sacred order of the universe. Here, death was never the end. It was the beginning of an eternal judgment. And whoever dared to break this silence would awaken what was never meant to be awakened. The Pharaoh was buried not as a mortal man, but as an eternal being. His tomb was sealed through sacred rituals and powerful spells inscribed within the ancient Book of the Dead. These symbols were never meant as decoration. They were everlasting covenants between the king and the gods. Breaking the seal was not merely an act of theft. It was a betrayal of the cosmic order itself. The priests warned anyone who dared approach the tombs of the kings. They believed that the spirit of the Pharaoh never truly slept, and that its wrath would never fade. Upon the temple walls, the curse was written with chilling clarity. Whoever steals from my tomb shall be pursued by unseen powers until even his name is erased from the earth. Despite every warning, the greedy pressed forward. They listened not to the voices of the priests, but to the promise of gold. They opened a doorway that had remained sealed for centuries, never realizing that some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed again. And in that very moment, their fate was changed forever. The curse did not begin with a scream, but with a whisper. No monster appeared, and no sound disturbed the silence, yet the air itself had changed, and the walls seemed to be watching. That is how true curses begin, without blood, without cries, only the overwhelming feeling that you are no longer alone. Every step deeper into the tomb was more than a simple descent. It was a journey toward a boundary that was never meant to be crossed. Nothing here had been abandoned. Everything had been preserved as though time itself stood guard. The gold was never merely a treasure, but a symbol of a power the pharaohs believed would last forever. Yet eternity shows no mercy to those who dare disturb it. The tomb began to reveal the first signs of its rejection. There were no clear voices, only strange disturbances in the air, the shadows, and the flames. Even the torch that had guided their path began to betray them. It was as though the tomb itself refused to accept their presence. The walls were not adorned with decoration. They carried a warning. Ancient words declared that whoever entered without permission would have their very name erased from existence. These inscriptions were far more terrifying than any sword, for they threatened not the body, but the soul and memory itself. And in that moment, true fear was born. There was no sword, and no visible enemy. Yet one of them suddenly fell. It was as though the tomb itself silently chose its victims. The others could not understand what had happened, but terror began creeping into their minds long before it reached their bodies. They believed their escape had finally begun, but the passage itself had changed. The walls were no longer silent. They seemed to watch them as though they were alive. Every footstep echoed twice, once beneath their own feet, and once from the shadow following behind them. Within the royal tombs, even the corridors possess a memory. One after another, their numbers began to dwindle without a trace. There were no screams, no blood, only an emptiness that swallowed them whole. Even the darkness itself seemed thicker wherever they disappeared. It was then they realized that their enemy was not something chasing them, but the place itself consuming them. As fear entered their hearts, their unity fell apart. Each one began blaming the other, as though survival had become impossible for them all. Yet the tomb paid no attention to human conflict. It continued its work in absolute silence. And here, silence was more terrifying than any sound. Escape was no longer an option. The stone door they had opened with their own hands closed by itself, as though it possessed a will of its own. There was no path back and no way forward except into the depths. It was then that the tomb revealed its true face. Reality began to blur with what they saw, or what they believed they saw. Shadows became figures, and the walls seemed to move at the edge of their vision. They could no longer distinguish fear from reality. Within the royal tomb, this marked the most dangerous stage of the end. The leader collapsed, not because he had been struck down, but because he had broken from within. Even his will could no longer withstand what this place was doing to them. The tomb did not need to destroy the body. Extinguishing the spirit was enough. And so, the end drew ever closer. They no longer knew where the beginning ended, or where the end began. Every path led back to the very place they had started, as though the tomb itself was mocking them. Time seemed to have stopped within these ancient walls. It was then they understood. They were no longer free. They began hearing what could not be heard. Whispers without a source. Words spoken in no language they could understand. Yet they were enough to send terror racing through their veins. For some voices do not come from the outside. They became separated, as though the tomb itself had intended it. Each one now faced the unseen alone. The light began to fade, taking with it the last trace of safety. And here, solitude was never salvation. After all the terror they had endured, something appeared that resembled an ending. A vast chamber, bathed in a strange golden light, stood before them, like a promise, or perhaps a trap. But within the ancient royal tombs, nothing is ever given without a price. And so, they approached the final chapter of the curse. The survivors reached what seemed to be the heart of the tomb, a chamber unlike the darkness they had faced before, a place filled with a strange golden glow. But in the world of royal tombs, light can sometimes be more dangerous than darkness, because sometimes it does not reveal the truth. It hides it. This was the center of the curse, the royal sarcophagus itself. Here rested a king who believed he would rule for eternity. But time does not recognize kings, nor golden seals. Everything humans leave behind waits for the moment it is uncovered. Opening the sarcophagus was not a decision. It was the moment when everything began to fall apart. Every step they had taken, every mystery they had uncovered, had led them here. And with the first movement of the ancient stone cover, the entire world seemed to hold its breath, as if something had finally awakened. What they found inside was not just treasure. It was something beyond understanding. Ancient symbols, forgotten artifacts, and a strange energy that had no explanation. This discovery was not a victory. It was the beginning of their downfall. And from that moment, everything changed. The tomb was no longer the same. The walls, the light, even time itself began to break apart. They could no longer tell what was real and what was the beginning of madness. But the tomb had already made its choice. The game was over. The curse was never just a legend. It was a system that had been waiting in silence. And when the final seal was broken, something ancient was released. Not a creature, not a shadow, but a force without a shape. A force whose only purpose was to end everyone who entered this place. There was no longer treasure, no longer knowledge, no longer greed. There was only one thing left: survival. They ran through the collapsing corridors, searching for a way out. But the tomb did not easily release those who entered, because whoever steps inside never leaves the same. The tomb began to collapse, not just as a place of stone, but as an entire world. It was as if the ancient walls were trying to erase everything and everyone inside. The darkness returned to the desert, where the story had begun, as if nothing had ever happened, or as if everything had finally ended. Only one person came out, or at least that was what everyone believed. He returned to the desert, but he was no longer the same. The silence returned around him, but inside his mind, the silence was gone forever. Because some doors, even after leaving them behind, remain open in memory. The tomb returned to its eternal silence. No one knows what truly happened there, except the one who survived and never speaks. In ancient Egypt, not every curse was written on the walls. Some curses were never written at all. They were understood through silence. And so, the legend of the royal tomb's curse came to an end. Our journey into the depths of the royal tombs has come to an end, but the secrets of ancient Egyptian civilization continue to spark debate among scientists and history enthusiasts around the world. Between reality and legend, the past remains a witness to a civilization that left behind eternal monuments and mysteries that have not been fully solved to this day. If you enjoyed this historical story, don't forget to support the video and follow the channel to discover more secrets of ancient Egypt and the great civilizations of history.